great compilation tape. Like breaking up is hard to do and takes ages longer than it might seem. You got to kick it off with a killer to grab attention. Then you got to take it up a notch. But you don't want to blow your wad, so then you got to cool it off a notch. There are a lot of rules.
12 albums, 1 cent. Find our ad in Sunday's paper. Take it to your mailbox. You'll get a lot more music. You'll get a lot more life. Look in your Sunday paper.
Welcome, listener. For those about to rock, we salute you. This is our podcast dedicated to exploring and talking about the greatness that was the music of the best decade. If you're ready for the best in retro music topics on the planet, we present for your enjoyment 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse.
Well, we are back again. Part 2, 1987, and another great year, and we have covered a lot. Last week, we covered some Pretty Made, some GNR, some Satriani, Metallica, Motley Crue's album, Girls, a lot of fun. Great White, Suicidal Tendencies, and who am I missing? Sabotage. So we talked about a lot of stuff, all 9 albums that we covered. We got a few more to go tonight with several more picks, a few more picks. I know there's 2 specifically that I think I really want to talk about. We kind of alluded to it last week, and I'm sure we'll be talking about both of those probably in depth. So I don't know what the other guys have picked for the night. I know what's on my mind. So why don't we go ahead and get started? We'll introduce everybody. It's the usual suspects. Chris is here and Tim is here.
Hello.
And
hey everybody, welcome back.
And of course it's me. Just me, Scott. Anyway, so let's get rolling. And why don't you go first this time?
All right. Let's see. I left off with Great White, and then I had about 17 other albums that were going to be number 4. So, of those 17, I am going to start off with kind of an odd one, Grim Reaper. If you guys know them, kind of tagged as a new wave of British heavy metal band. They released Rock You to Hell in 1987, and it's funny if you didn't know anything about these guys. And you saw the album cover with a kind of a gothic font and a bloody image, you might think they were some like early form of death metal or something, but they're not. They're, especially on this album, which was their 3rd and unfortunately final album, this was just prototypical headbanging, poofy-haired 80s metal with tons of guitar solos and screaming vocals. Lyrically, not the most, complex album in the world, but musically, this is definitely full of air guitar moments, and it's just fun. It's good, fun, solid heavy metal. Steve Grimmett, the singer, he really, I think, came into his own on this album. He's completely underrated. He's got a great mid-range, a great upper range. Nick Bocott, the guitar player, it's just an awesome riffer and soloist. Fortunately, I believe he pretty much stopped making music after the band broke up around 1988. He got into some other things in the industry, but Steve Grimmett then kicked around. He's been in a number of other bands. He's still going strong. He's got his own version now of Grim Reaper. They still play out. But this album here, it's funny that it all just came together on this 3rd album. Their first 2, production-wise, didn't sound that great. A lot of the songs, lyrics are just overly repetitious, and they just kind of coalesced into a really cool band. And I think a lot of fans that maybe were thrown for a loop by Judas Priest at this period because they released Turbo in '86. I think a lot of them, had they known about this Grim Reaper album, they probably would have gravitated towards it. I think it would have filled the void. But I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but if not, I would definitely highly recommend checking it out. It's a good, fun metal album.
Yeah, I don't have a lot on this one. I remember hearing them I remember hearing of them, but I really did not get into them. So Chris, do you have anything on this one?
I honestly don't. I don't think I've ever heard of this band.
Really? I mean,
Yeah,
I've definitely heard of them. I knew they were around a long time ago, but
And this was their last album, Tim? This was their last? 'Cause it seems like there's nothing after this.
Yeah, this was their third and final.
Yeah, it seemed like that Steve, is it Grimmett or Grimmett? I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but he seemed to be very prolific. Like, if you look him up, he did a lot in music over the next 30 years. I mean, like, he didn't just stop and go to an island somewhere. He did a lot of things. Yeah, he did a lot of things. I've never even heard of him, but he was on some tribute albums and 6, 7 different bands. I mean, pretty cool. Maybe more. Actually, there's more here. There's a whole second level. That's really neat. I honestly, I've never heard of them. And he's from England, but they recorded this in the U.S. That's pretty interesting. It says recorded in Massachusetts.
Yeah,
it threw me off for a second because I'm like, new wave of British heavy metal, and they recorded it in Massachusetts. But okay, so they did record it in the U.S.
But I would say for starters, take a look, YouTube, the title track, the video for "Rock You to Hell." It was pretty cool. There's some cameos in there from some other musicians of the era, and there's at least 5, 6 good solid up tempo rockers on this album. You might have heard "Fear No Evil" or "See You in Hell." Those were other songs they had from prior albums that made a little bit of a dent somewhere. But unfortunately, no, they never hit it big, although Grimmett has had a tremendous career with a number of bands. It's too bad. They're certainly underrated, and obviously as evidenced by this podcast.
It is because maybe it's just one of those bands that kind of got lost in the wash somewhere. It being good and then just not really hitting that big time. There's tons of bands like that, or maybe a band that had one hit and just kind of fell off the face of the earth. Not like This Is That Band kind of band, and it just seemed like like from 1984. I think was their first album I see on here. And that was sort of a little late towards the end of the new wave of British heavy metal kind of craze, towards the tail end when more of the U.S. bands started to really pick it up. So maybe that was it. So they were just kind of at that end part of the British wave. Maybe they just got kind of lost there somewhere.
Well, you got to look, just look at the competition. I mean, not necessarily that they're in a group. There's a lot of different bands out there. So if a couple get, passed by some fans or others, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, like I have a ton of these bands on this list on the Wikipedia page. I have, the only reason I've heard of them is because I've seen a few of their names pop up over the few years that we've been doing. Like the Tigers of Paying Tang. I'd never heard of them before, and both of you guys knew of them. So, it's not a surprise that a few get slipped by here and there. But I do remember Grim Reaper. So Chris, what's your pick?
My first, I'm actually going to go with a little bit lesser of something that I would have gone with, but it still was a big album, and that's Aerosmith's Permanent Vacation. And the reason I am is sort of the rebirth. Very few bands get a huge second chance once you sort of fall off the charts, and once you fall away. They had 2 or 3, maybe even 4 albums in between their big 70s time to this one that just were not good at all. And this album sort of clean, sober, allegedly, and just really sold. It had some good songs on it. It has songs that you can hum in your head. You listen to in the car, like Ragdoll, Dude Looks Like a Lady. There's some really good songs on this album, and they did well to sort of reestablish kind of what they were in a different way. I listened to it. I liked it. I liked the band. I liked the guys. I liked their talent. I suppose again, Tim, it's no strange thing that it's sort of Desmond Child might have had his hand in a little bit of this, and working with a great producer like Bruce Fairbairn and John Kolodner, the radio executive. I mean, they had a lot of push. There must have been some people who were dragging them out of the gutter and saying, "Look, you guys can still play. You're talented. Let's do something here." And I just thought it was a great album. It was a really good album for them. Not the biggest Aerosmith fan of this time period, but I just thought it was interesting that you have a 70s Aerosmith and you have a late 80s, early 90s Aerosmith, and not many bands get that opportunity to have a career with a huge gap of creativity in it and come back even stronger and selling more albums than they did ever. I don't know what you guys think, but I just thought this was a pretty important album in that year, especially for this band who had a following of people that probably were 15 years older than the people who are hearing this on the radio in the current time. Interesting coercion of fan bases.
Yeah, it's true. I was never a huge Aerosmith fan either. I do like, select tracks from the old days, I guess.
Yeah, there's about 4 or 5 that everyone likes, and that's about
right.
it.
And yeah, I mean, I remember seeing they had that one video, or maybe there were a couple, just real grainy, crappy, cheap quality looking videos during those off years, and then all of a sudden this thing just kind of came out of nowhere. It was kaboom, and the videos were all over the place. It sold a ton, and yeah, I mean, they really came back from the void to be a huge band again. It was pretty amazing. You're absolutely right. I don't know, who else has done that? Like anybody? I can't think of.
Yeah, I mean, to say that you had a good 8 to 10 year run when you're creating at your best, and then you fall off the face of the earth for a good 8 years that you're just making terrible albums or you're not doing anything at all. And all of a sudden you come back and you have a second level of success at an even higher level than probably you did before, sales-wise, exposure, all that kind of stuff. I just thought it was an interesting comparison of, like, if you tried to sit down and name another band that ever had that in their career, we'd be hard-pressed to do, I think.
Yeah, this is kind of an anomaly. And honestly, I don't like the new Aerosmith. I didn't really like them at all. I kind of like Tim. I like a handful of their classics. Dream On, Sweet Emotion. You can't go wrong with some of those songs. They're classics. Mamakin, stuff like that. But I gotta tell you, Ragdoll and Dude Looks Like a Lady, I cannot stand those songs. They drive me nuts. And even bringing it up, the songs are in my head, and now it's they don't go away.
Right.
It's especially Ragdoll. It just hangs, and it's that earworm that you get, and you just can't shake it. And it is really, really interesting that they did come back almost from the dead. I mean, they had not been heard of for a while. They released a couple albums here and there, like you said, but they never did anything. Nobody ever, none of their singles really did well until this album. It's really bizarre that they would come back and at the strength, and then to continue on and almost build a whole new audience, a different age, different demographic of audience at this point. Because like you said, it was 7, 8 years, and some of the people that were listening to them are probably 10, 15 years older than us. So
yeah,
it's a very interesting album to bring up. Although I can't stand it. I just I don't like it at all.
I mean, hey, it's not the best album in the world music-wise. I mean, there's a couple songs that people like, and I listen to them if they're on. I won't turn them off. But at the same time, I thought it was more of an interesting perspective of being just completely two separate and totally different careers. Just interesting that, and it was in this year. Is pretty neat to see.
Yeah. I should say that this is kind of a blinding flash of the obvious here, but Kiss sort of fell into that pattern too. But the reason they didn't pop to my mind is because, unlike Aerosmith, they never really took a year off. They just kept churning albums out all through the late 70s, and they just kept going and trying and throwing stuff against the wall to see what stuck, all through the 80s, an album a year. Whereas Aerosmith, I'm looking here, and they had 3-year gaps and things, and But Kiss did sort of effectively die around about 1981 when Music from the Elder came out, and then they were platinum again a couple of years later when they took the makeup off and did Lick It Up. So it's similar, but not quite as dramatic as what happened to Aerosmith, I would say.
Yeah, and you're right. And and that's also two bands that had, what amounts to at this point, a 40-plus year career.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of those around. That are still fairly relevant, maybe not musically relevant right now, but at the very least, they're socially and music industry relevant,
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
How about you there, young sir?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Are you talking to me?
Talking to you.
So I want to talk about Whitesnake, their self-titled album, and Tawny Katane. Whitesnake and Tawny Katane.
Whitesnake featuring Tawny Katane.
Exactly.
Yeah. At some point, it was Tawny Katane featuring Whitesnake. Let's be honest.
Yeah. We watched a lot of Tawny Katane videos with Whitesnake in the background. No, I listened to that album again today, and there's some really, really good songs on it. I still like it, and it did amazing sales-wise, just incredible. Here I Go Again, although one of my least favorite songs, especially when you hear the pop radio version of it, where the keyboards are extra heavy. You ever notice the two different versions that they have of that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's the one with the extra keyboards just drives me nuts. And way overplayed. But the other songs on this, Children of the Night, Crying in the Rain, Bad Boys, Still of the Night, all these are great. Still of the Night, okay, that video alone was pretty awesome. They have, of course, the fabulous Tawny Katane. But then when in the guitar solo later on, I think it was Vandenberg, maybe Campbell, I don't know who was playing their guitar with a bow. But that was like, wow, that's really cool. That's something different. I've never seen anything like that before. And
what?
Yeah, seriously, I'd not seen a guitar, like an electric guitar.
Oh
seriously.
My God!
I know.
Okay.
I know.
Continue.
Hey,
we're gonna choke you later. Okay, just letting you know.
Wow.
Yeah, like who? Okay, who?
My goodness.
Who did that? Who else did that?
One James Page from a band called Led Zeppelin, circa
right.
1973.
But you know what? I've never seen him live, and I've only watched that.
Song Remains
the
the
video?
Same.
Yeah,
Song Remains the
where
Same.
it's just like
one.
But it's just a long acid trip, and I couldn't pay attention. So.
All right, go ahead.
Okay,
I'm just like that. That was right up there with I didn't know Little Susie was a cover song.
Oh, shut up. You know what's funny though is for this lineup, it was almost a super group. You had Vivian Campbell, you had Adrian Vandenberg, you had Rudy Sarzo from Quiet Riot, and somebody else before. He was with somebody else too, and then Tommy Aldridge, the drummer. And I saw them live, and Tommy Aldridge put on one of the best drum solos that I've ever seen at a concert. It was amazing. So anyway, it's good. It's good stuff. I love this album. I can still go back and listen to it like I did today. A couple of songs are, like what was the one? Stray for the Heart. Never a huge fan of that one, but most of the rest of it is something I like. Is This Love? Your typical sappy ballad from the heavy metal big hair. Oh, dude. And the video, if you look at the videos, these guys had some serious hair going. It was good stuff. What do you guys think of this one?
What's funny to me about this album is all the stuff going on behind the scenes, because a couple of the songs were just updated versions of older Whitesnake songs on like old albums that nobody bought. Everybody that you just listed there was not performing on the album.
Right, during the recording, right?
Yeah, he assembled his dream team afterwards. Although I know, yes, I actually lost a bet on this, that the guitar solo that Adrian Vandenberg played. Somebody asked me once, who plays a solo and blah, blah, blah. And I said, it was John Sykes. And they made me a bet, and I actually lost the Judas Priest album on the bet when they showed me the liner notes and said, no, it actually was Vandenberg played the one solo on the album. But that's how I learned. That's when I really started figuring out that, it's funny because this is a John Sykes album on guitar. But then the other two guys came in for the tour and the videos and the big hair, and Rudy Sarzo came in, he's licking his bass and all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And then, yeah, you're right. There were like weren't there like different versions of this album? I think the European version and the American version had different, the mixes were different, like you're saying about the keyboards and stuff. It's just funny. There's so much went into this thing. It's like it just wasn't another album. There was just a lot of stuff going on. But then when it finally came out, it was a huge hit. Yeah, and I would say, a lot of people probably got sucked in because of Tawny Katane in the videos. I think we could all probably agree on that. That was some serious eye candy,
Oh, yeah.
And even the one, gosh, what was it? I forget. I'm drawing a blank. I'm getting too old. But one of the videos, there was a version where it was the one where they're driving through the tunnel or whatever, and David's driving the car and Tawny's hanging out the passenger side window, and the wind actually blows her blouse open and you can see her naked breast for a split second. That actually made it onto MTV, and I used to record Headbangers Ball on VHS tapes. I actually had that, and I remember watching that one time thinking, wait a minute, what was that? And we had to actually go back and pause it. Me and my buddy were like, wow, they actually, and then it got edited out. Of course, then there was a different version. But anyway, no, this thing was all over the place, and guys liked it, girls liked it, because his dream team, some of the men in the band were pretty attractive, I guess. And so there was another reason for young women to like Whitesnake, and of course the subject matter of a lot of the songs. A lot of people could get into that, and it was quite the formula, quite a success.
Yeah, I had a girlfriend at the time when this came out, and she was crazy about Rudy Sarzo, and we went and actually met him at it was a record signing or something at a record store, and she got her picture with him and everything. She was very excited.
Yeah, well, there's there's a certain recipe that at this point in hard rock heavy metal is going to work. First of all, be with Geffen Records and get publicity because they're hot at this point. Get John Kalodner as your A&R guy, who's going to ship all the band members a case of Aquanet and say, let's get pretty, let's get on MTV. They worked a little bit with Bob Rock, who really did amazing guitar sound for Sykes on the recording, and then go to Little Mountain Studios in Canada, which pumped out probably for the next 5 or 6 years. I would guess the albums that came out of that studio and the production and everything that happened up there, probably 100 million albums, sold out of that single recording studio. It's prolific at this point, starting to be. But, the two highest rated songs from the album, both the Katane video songs hit number 1 and number 2 on the Hot 100. You can't tell me that didn't have something to do with it, the video and the sales. But really cool music. The guitar sound on Still of the Night is insane. Granted, there's probably about 7 layered guitar tracks on that song, which is definitely a Bob Rock sort of signature to just layer the tracks, layer. It creates a much thicker tone, but it's a good album, no denying. It's sold like probably maybe second or third amount of sales from this year if you add everything up. 8 times platinum over the course of 10 maybe at this point. Who knows how far it went. But a really good album, a good lineup of musicians. Later, maybe a better lineup of musicians. I'm not sure. I don't know if Rudy Sarzo coated his bass neck in like honey or something, because I can tell you that lacquer does not taste good. I'm not really sure why he did that.
So you know this for a fact.
I happen to.
Have you yes. Licked, then you're saying you've licked your bass.
Well, a couple times. You get really attached. What can I say?
Okay. All right.
But yeah, no, it's a good album. It really is. Musically, it's good. Sonically, it's very appealing. And can't say anything really too bad about it. Can't. Cool. I would like to. I really would, because I'm not a big hair band person, and it just kind of. But the music's good. The music is really, really, really well put together, well recorded, well written, and it's really good.
Yeah, the production level is pretty amazing. So anyway.
If you look up that studio, in any case, just as a random shot, just look at Little Mountain Studios in Vancouver and see the albums that came out of there for about the next 6 years, and it's a pretty impressive line of albums that came out of that studio. It became probably the number one hard rock heavy metal recording studio that everybody wanted to go to, and no one could book time.
Cool. All right. Well, how about Tim? What's your next pick? I know you got 14 more to go.
That's hard. Yeah. I guess I'm going to go with Dawkins, Back for the Attack. And this one, it's not my, I guess, as far as Dokken albums go, I'd probably put this just behind Under Lock and Key. But that said, it's amazing that these guys even got this album done, if you believe all the stories, because they pretty well hated each other. And it's funny to me as you look down the songwriting credits. First of all, there's 13 songs on the album. It's over 60 minutes long, which for a hair metal band, that's just unbelievable. That's like epic length. I think this was one of the first. Metallica, Master of Puppets was about an hour long, but this isn't Metallica. This is Dokken, right? And they don't write those big, long, epic songs. So there's a lot of songs on here. This, wasn't your typical 9 or 10 song album. But every one of them, it's funny. It's different permutations of band members writing, and you could just, after hearing the stories later about how much they hated each other, I could really see these guys sitting around and nitpicking and saying, well, I wrote more of track 3 than you did, so my name should come before yours. Yeah, well, I wrote more on track 5 than you did, so my name's going to come before yours. And that kind of nonsense. It just seems like that kind of stuff was probably going on. But anybody got to love the song Kiss of Death and the instrumental Mr. Scary. George Lynch's riffs and lead guitar playing in those two tracks is unbelievable. Totally, if you hadn't already believed him or rated him as a top guitarist, those two songs will seal it for you. Burning Like a Flame was a video, it was a pretty big single. And then Dream Warriors, which was the song from the Nightmare on Elm Street soundtrack that they had released a little earlier in the year as a single. Those are the 4 songs that really anchor the album. Some of the stuff isn't quite so strong, and 13 songs, 60 odd minutes. Tension wavers maybe a little bit if you listen to the thing from start to finish, but it enabled them to go out on tour. They were part of the big Monsters of Rock tour that went around the next year in '88, where they toured with Metallica and Van Halen and some other bands. And then they broke up, and it was a shame. We're a cool band. It's too bad they didn't get along, but that's what happens, I guess. But I have some friends who absolutely love this album, and they basically were crying in their beer when Dokken broke up, and they felt that this one, Back for the Attack, was going to be the stepping stone to that one album that was really going to put them over the top and just make them the biggest band in the world, and it didn't quite happen. So I don't know. What do you guys feel? Are you into Dokken at all, this part of their career?
I started losing interest in this album. Previous albums, I liked them a lot, but this one didn't really grab my attention. I mean, other than Mr. Scary is truly really is amazing. I love George Lynch. I love his style. His playing style is it's got a really nice, unique sound to it. I liked him when he went on to do Lynch Mob. But overall, it was okay. Didn't really do much for me. Dream Warriors kind of annoyed me. I don't know why. And that would be Dream Warriors. I think that was Nightmare on Elm Street 3. So anyway. Chris, what?
Yeah, they lost me to Dream Warriors. I'll be honest with you. You're right though, Tim. You just thought maybe they would have that one album that would put them over. But I think the amount that they don't like each other, rumor or not, recording this album in 5 different studios kind of speaks to the fact. I mean, they must have just walked out on each other. Said, all right, next month, the record company's calling them back. Well, we booked another studio in L.A., so they recorded around L.A. They must have been in and out of studios so much they couldn't just stand it to be in the same presence of each other. Either that, or they were just plugging in different boards around the city, and George Lynch is doing his guitar tracks at this studio, and or was doing different tracking at different studios because they just couldn't stand to be in the same room with each other. But George Lynch is fantastic. This album just lost me. You just kind of want him to be better. You just did. And they just didn't, whether it was personal or, sometimes bands just run out of music. And then you run out of music and you're in the studio with each other and you don't have that friendship and you can't get that creativity going because you don't want to talk to each other and everything becomes forced. And then it just dies out because sometimes you just don't ever get that back. But and I did see these band, the Monsters of Rock, though, Tim, too, Metallica and Van Halen and everybody else, and they were good. You know, they were good, but it just seemed like whatever that flame that they had for creativity together, it died somewhere along the making of this album. It just stopped, it ceased to exist.
But what's funny to me, though, is if a band is petering out or whatever, you'd think they'd have maybe 8 songs on a cover and just get the hell out of the studio and be done with it, you know?
Yeah.
But this thing was so much more. It was just odd. It was another kind of, you know, just amazing that it got done.
The thing too is there could have been a lot of tracks stacked up from a previous album, and they're like, well, we don't want to record together. We've got a bunch of this material that we didn't make it on the previous album. Let's just finish it and dump our whole load right on here in this album and see what happens. Because at this point, we don't know if we're going to make another album. I mean, I'm not saying that is the case, but it could have been 4 or 5 tracks left over from Under Lock and Key that never made it on the album. They just said, all right, let's just polish them up, record this part, and just put a whole bunch of stuff on an album.
Do you guys ever feel that Dokken could never get quite past that second tier in the industry? They were.
Oh yeah.
They were
just
short of being really, really amazing.
That's what I was trying to say before with my buddies. Were like, you know, God, I thought this was going to be the album, and I know it was going to be the next one was going to get them to that spot.
Yeah.
And it just
I mean, they were a great band, and you know, I can't give enough praise to Lynch, but. And Don Dokken, I love his voice. I think he's got a great voice for the genre, you know. But yeah, I just don't ever feel like they ever could make it just quite past that next step, you know. So it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, you're right. They're solid tier 2 band that just they tried to peek in the door to tier 1 and somebody kicked them in the face back down to tier 2, and they never got back up again.
All right, cool, great pick. Chris, you want to take your next pick?
I'm going to settle deeply into my wheelhouse.
Excellent.
And
excellent.
Anthrax, Among the Living. Just this to me was the album that sort of just put them to that next level. I Am the Law, Caught in a Mosh, Indians, classic Anthrax songs. NFL, I'm not going to say what it means backwards. You guys can try to figure out what it is on your own. This is a family-friendly show, so just call it NFL. But it's a great band, a great album. This was the one that it solidified them with Joey Belladonna. Really cool music. All the musicianship is great. I loved it. I listened to it back and forth for years and years and years and years. Again, George Marino in New York, good friends. Johnny Z, executive producer. Still the same usual suspects with that. They kind of kept that together, and I think that keeping that together really started to be able to let them write better music, more together music, and stay hungry to keep achieving. At this point, you know, Metallica's getting bigger. Megadeth is on the scene. They're starting to really get things going. And Anthrax was like one of those original early 80s speed thrash metal bands, and they're kind of looking up going, you know, why aren't we up there with those guys? And I think this album really tried to put them in that stratosphere.
I got nothing on Anthrax, really. I wish...
Besides being able to send it in an envelope, right?
Yeah. What do you got, Tim?
Well, I like this one too. I Indians, of course, grabbed my attention. I think that's probably the first song I heard off of it. And one of my buddies is like the world's biggest Anthrax fan, and actually a couple of buddies of mine. And you know, when they got this tape, you know, we listened to it quite a bit. And what's cool now, looking back and doing research for this podcast and looking stuff up and reading about all, you know, they go into pretty good amount of detail on Wikipedia about what all the songs are about. And I always like reading that sort of thing. So it's kind of neat. You know, some of the comic book stuff, the Judge Dredd stuff, and the Stephen King stuff, and then NFL, Ifo Niku Fessin. You know, that it was funny when I was a kid and figured out what that meant. But I didn't know what it was about. We always just laughed at the title. Haha, it's a swear word backwards. But then reading this now is about John Belushi. That's really cool.
Yeah, Belushi. Yeah, it was about his life and death in a sense.
So I thought that was, pretty cool because, John Belushi was a favorite of mine and sucked that he died young. And obviously these guys felt the same way and they wrote a song about it. It was pretty cool. And I think I want to say this is where I first heard the word mosh. I don't think I'd ever heard the word before. Yeah,
you know what? It was the first time I'd ever seen it on an album. Because being in a mosh pit, that's what it's called live. I think it was the first time I've seen it like in a song title myself.
But was the term mosh pit actually in existence in 1986, 87?
Oh yeah, very much so.
I know the thing existed, but people called it.
But calling it a mosh pit, that did exist. It wasn't very used very much because you didn't go see Bon Jovi and Whitesnake and all these other bands. There's no mosh pit, so it was kind of centered around. In a sense, a particular band and a style of music, and then of course it became like part of the heavy metal language later on.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure this song, you're right, did that. This song probably put that into the lexicon of heavy metal, as opposed to just the people who were seeing thrash bands and doing mosh pits.
Yeah, because I remember people talking. Of course, the concerts I went to back then, I wasn't going to see thrash bands. I was never in a mosh pit when I was 16 years old. But I remember people talking about slam dancing. But I'd never heard. I don't think I ever heard the term mosh pit or mosh until this album came out. So that's
slam dancing too was punk, which was funny. That was late 70s, early 80s punk. Which then a lot of punk became sort of heavy metal, progressive metal, and ended up. But yeah, slam dancing, you're absolutely right. That was the heretofore thing. And but yeah, I remember it being a mosh pit before that song came out. I think actually the song was written because they had already heard that terminology at their concerts. Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. That makes sense. But I just remember the T-shirts everybody was wearing with "Mosh It Up" down the sleeve after this came out. Everybody was moshing after this song came out.
I'm going to get you a mosh pit shirt for Christmas, Tim.
Speaking of that, do you remember MTV always used to have these just odd little like 5-10 second little things they would show at random times, and there was one. It was Santa in a mosh pit. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but there was footage of, I don't know what concert it was, but it was some venue full of sweaty long-haired dudes all crashing around, slamming into each other, and then all through the middle of it you saw this like cheesily animated Santa Claus running through the mosh pit.
I think you're right. I think I do remember that actually.
Now that you guys have mentioned, I'm reading it along as you guys are talking about how it was inspired by one of Stephen King's books. Actually, a couple of them. It says a novella, Skeleton in the Closet, Apartment, Apt Pupil, which I've read all the. The Stand is one of my favorite books of all time. I just love that book, and I did not know that this was based on the main bad guy. The title track, Among the Living, right? I think. Is that what it says? Yeah, something like that. Anyway, great. That's great. I'm going to have to look into this one because being such a Stephen King fan, I'm going to have to check it out.
Go ahead.
Just as a Stephen King fan.
It is kind of interesting, too, from the reading standpoint and things like that, because if you look at like some of the thrash bands, Megadeth, Metallica, Anthrax, those are three of the big four. They all seem to be very avid readers, and they pull a lot from books. They pull a lot from stories, even movies and things like that. So I don't know how many other bands. It just seemed kind of interesting that from a genre perspective, that a lot of what these bands were writing a lot of it was book and novel based.
Yeah, this is the second time I've seen The Stand mentioned, just by a couple. The first one being Metallica off of. I think it's Ride the Lightning album.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look into this one because it sounds interesting from a different perspective.
Yeah. I'm going to do one real quick, though, also with Anthrax. They also released an EP that year with I'm the Man as the song, who ended up becoming probably the first rap / metal, thrash metal song. It was probably the beginning of that genre. And later it became a huge genre. They're also from New York. They're friends with the Beastie Boys. They did kind of write that song tongue-in-cheek about the Beastie Boys, or in that kind of style, not about them, but in that style. It was weird because the main guitar riff was the Hava Nagila, like folk song. It's really cool. If you've never heard it, Scott, I think Tim knows it because I could tell by his. But if you've never heard it, Scott, it's an incredible song. It was an EP from the same band. It's a couple of live songs and a cover, but man, what a cool song that was, and basically began a genre. And not too funny that Anthrax New York roots and like a style like the Beastie Boys and getting to know them was really, really cool. So I just throw that out as a side note to the Anthrax choice.
Okay. Yeah, it certainly had led to other things, at the time. I thought it was great. It was funny. It was awesome. But, then the whole rap metal thing that just exploded a few years later. Oh, my God, I can't stand any of it. It's just funny to see that it came from here, which was something I loved, and it turned into something I despised. It was
All right, but I want to make that real quick before I jumped off the Anthrax, because I didn't want to count the 5-song EP as another record.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
All right. Well, it's my turn, and I'm going to go ahead. We have to talk about it. One I talked about last week, Hysteria. Now this is one of
the elephant in the room.
It's the second time you guys have left it back up to me to bring up the one of the best-selling albums of the year. Last week it was Guns N' Roses, and now it's Whitesnake and Hysteria. So Hysteria, not one of my favorite albums by Def Leppard, but interesting album how this came together with Rick Allen still being able to play drums with one arm. Ever since that all went down and he continued to play, I have more respect for the guy than I would have ever in previous to that, because you can't imagine how important it is to have both of your arms while drumming. I can't play drums with two arms, and he can play with one, and he plays very well with one. And it's just really amazing that he was able to overcome such a huge obstacle. And it says a lot about what he really loves to do. It's not about the money. It's not about the fame. He loves to play drums because most people would let that, hold them back, I think. So I just think that's a really interesting part of this album, and that he continued on. But the song, the tracks on this one they're all pretty decent. Like I said, Pour Some Sugar on Me. Okay. Probably one of the biggest selling singles from Def Leppard ever. It's probably their best seller. Overall, I think some of the songs that were not played on the radio were more of my favorites, like Don't Shoot Shotgun. I thought that was kind of a good one. And Gods of War. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, you got somebody okay over there?
Oh, hold on a second. Yeah, sorry. She was having a coughing fit.
That's okay. Sorry. Making sure she's not choking.
Okay. Yeah, she's good.
You obviously have to talk about this album. It's, and it wasn't my favorite either. The ballads I could do without, like Love Bites and Hysteria. I don't need to hear those anymore. I didn't need to hear them the first time either. But you just have to give all kinds of respect to these guys for sticking with Rick Allen.
Yeah, you're right. You know what? It's not just Rick Allen that had to overcome it. The whole band had to. Very good point. Thank you.
Because they were coming off Pyromania, which was a super huge breakthrough in its own right. And it's like, oh, God, now our drummer can't play anymore. It's like you had to figure there were a lot of maybe, I don't know if they had meetings or just unspoken thoughts like, we're really poised for something here, and I don't know how he's going to be able to do this, and but they did, and that's just awesome. Even if the album sucked and I hated it, I would still respect the heck out of them for doing what they did and figuring out a way to keep him in the band like that. That is just one of the coolest stories I think ever in music. I love that. But musically speaking, yeah, I would agree with you that like my favorite song is Run Riot off this album. And like, who knows that song? Nobody, because everybody knows all the huge, ginormous singles that were all over the place. And this was another album too, like the Dokken one, where it was long. It was over an hour long for a, quote unquote pop metal band or whatever. That was a big deal. The song lengths on some of these, Gods of War is almost 7 minutes long. Rocket, the full version is almost 7 minutes long. It's like, I don't really remember this being that long of an album. I thought it was a lot of pop songs type stuff. But when I pulled it out last week to listen to it again for the first time in quite a while, it's like, yeah, wow, these songs kind of take a while to get through some of them. It was interesting. I had kind of forgotten that.
Actually, I made note of that on Rocket this morning too when I was listening to it. I'm like, wow, this song is really a longer song than I'm used to hearing from these guys. So go on. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's funny, Yeah, you're right. Pour some sugar on me. It's like you shook me all night long. I don't need to hear it anymore. It's fun, sure, but I don't need to hear it. And I kind of thought that about some of the other tunes, but I actually really, really discovered that I liked Armageddon It quite a bit, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. I rediscovered that song. I thought it was silly back in the day, I guess, but it's a cool song. So everyone's mileage may vary for sure. It was a huge album, like the Whitesnake album. Boys and girls all loved it. Big concerts, sold a bajillion copies. So good for Def Leppard. It's not my favorite though.
Yeah, it's a little overproduced, sort of, for my taste. I didn't really identify with it as far as, I got to go and buy this album. I honestly, I don't think I ever bought it. I'm not one of the 25 million people across the world who ever paid for this. But, number one, obviously, you got to respect the band very much for sticking around, and obviously respect Rick Allen for doing what he did. I mean, he could have just cashed in and said, I can't do this. And that's a pretty interesting testament on who he is as a person to not give up and have to have a custom drum set built around him with custom triggers and things like that he could hit with his feet that would mimic the hand that he didn't have anymore. I mean, so it's like a whole different way of learning drums. You can say, oh, he's a drummer. He had to relearn how to play drums completely because his foot pedal activity had a trigger system electronically that would trigger certain sounds that he would be using to hit with the arm that he lost. So just an incredible amount of fortitude and sticking to it. And I mean, the album sold like crazy. You can't deny. I mean, it's like it was like, even like Wikipedia, I always thought it said that rock's version of Michael Jackson's Thriller, and that every track was a potential hit single. I mean, they almost did that. I think every song on this album was on a radio at some point, maybe later and way down the road, but you certainly heard these songs. I like Armageddon It. It's kind of a catchy song. Run Riot is really good. It is a good song. The rest of it, it was very systematic of what Def Leppard. But it's interesting to see, like, I think this is Def Leppard at its peak, the band's peak. Songwriting, socially, live. They played in the round, which hadn't been done really a lot. That was a really big deal. I did go to see him in concert with friends. Prodded on because of a girl, because basically at that age you do everything because of a girl. Doesn't matter what it is. So, yeah, sure, I'll go see Def Leppard. And they played in a round, and it was cool. Like the first concert I've ever been to where they were in the middle of the stage, and you could see all the way around the arena. There was no backdrop. There was no backstage. I mean, it was just everything. It was cool. It was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen at that point as far as a live concert. So, yeah, I mean, they're great. It's congratulations to them. It's nice to see something like this is in like an organism, like a band, an organization, whatever you want to call it, at its very peak. They would never be this good again, and they were never this good or popular before. This is it. This is their mountaintop, and it's really cool as far as that part goes.
I have a tendency to.
That's all I got.
To like the climb, the bands as they're climbing up to get to the top before they hit the top, and then I kind of lose interest after that. So okay, we've all picked 2 this time around. We picked 3 last week, so we're both all at 5. I want to go ahead and do Twitter shout-outs on the Facebook posts from last week, and there's a few bands that are mentioned, so we can kind of go over those instead of taking another round, unless you guys have really, a specific one that you're looking for. What do you think? Does that work for you guys?
Works for me. Yeah, that works for me.
Because we'll see what they bring up. Like Rose posted last week. Our good friend Rose at 80's Music Girl on Twitter. She did Dio, Dream Evil, Ozzy's Tribute, and she also picked Aerosmith Permanent Vacation. So those are all good albums. The Tribute with Randy Rhoads, that was a pretty big album for that year for them to bring back the Randy Rhoads sound for a little bit after he's been gone for 5 years at this point, right? He was at 82 or 80? Was it 81?
Yeah, I believe so.
Anyway, so we got those. What do you guys think of those two, Dio and Ozzy?
I just remember the video from the Ozzy, the Crazy Train Live with Ozzy and his crazy hairdo, where he looked like a housewife with crazy 80s hair. That's the thing I remember about it the most. I'm sorry. And the Dio one was interesting that he carried on without Vivian Campbell. Slapped Craig Goldie in there and kept right on going and made another Dio album. It's good for him. I kind of prefer the earlier Dio ones, but yeah, it was very cool that he kept right on going.
Yeah. I sort of like Tim. I sort of preferred the earlier Dio stuff, but I mean, he was still Ryan James Dio, so he was still cool. I mean, the coolest short guy in music maybe ever. He's just a very cool guy. He just seemed like a very cool guy. I don't, for whatever it was worth, but how can you go wrong with an Ozzy Osbourne tribute album with Randy Rhoads? I mean, there's nothing bad about this. 5 years later, I think it was 82. He had great personnel, Sarzo and all. I mean, it was very cool. Especially for a lot of people who loved Randy Rhoads and who's still like an icon today, even though he's been, passed away 34 years ago or whatever it is at this point. But also with with Ozzy, like with the hair, I swear to this day that Ozzy Osbourne was wearing one of Sharon's dresses in a couple of the videos in the middle 80s. I mean, I don't know what it was. I don't know what he was wearing, like these long, sparkly coat robe things. I thought it was a dress. I don't know what was going on with Ozzy, but
that's a good one.
Yeah, he somewhere along the way he joined the Aquanet Club.
Okay, that's all I can find on Twitter, but we do have a few on Facebook. My cousin Josh, he's putting some more posts out there, and I think Chris, you're gonna like some of these. Death, Scream, Bloody Gore. He says my favorite. He says my favorite death metal band in middle school. He also mentioned Exodus, Racer X, Satriani.
Yeah.
So those, he's picking some crazier ones there.
He's my new favorite person.
Like that.
No, there's some definitely some
I don't
good
know.
music
I don't know
there.
any of those other than Satriani. I remember
you don't like Racer X.
We had talked. I think Tim had brought Racer X up a few years previous to this, or within the last couple of years. But I did not know of them at the time. So I remember hearing.
Yeah, Death was actually an Orlando, then a little bit later Tampa band. They were one of the original sort of death metal bands that sort of showed up around this time, like Deicide and that whole. At this time, that death metal Tampa Bay area was really starting to fester, and there's a lot of bands that came out of that. So I'm pretty familiar with the band Death.
I actually saw them live, 1999-ish. I think they played the Double Door in Chicago with Hammerfall, a Swedish band, opening up. And I really had no interest whatsoever in seeing Death live. And my buddy wanted to see them, and he had no interest in Hammerfall. So we both kind of sucked it up and went together because we didn't want to go to the show alone. And they were completely wildly different bands. And boy, that was an experience seeing Death live, man.
Yeah. Yeah, they're obviously they were around while what we were playing, so we had not run-ins, but we're familiar with sort of who they are and that scene, and that like 99 was kind of towards the end. I think they only lasted maybe a couple more years after that.
Well, Chuck, I'm not sure how you say his last name, Schuldiner, but he passed away at the end of 2001, I think, right? So
yeah, that was the end of it for them. They only lasted a couple more years after that. In 2001, but neat. That's neat shout outs because I would not have thought anybody would have brought up Death. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
You should listen to some Racer X though. Scott,
Racer X,
seriously.
Really?
Yeah.
That's up my. That'd be up.
Yeah,
my
you
alley.
might not. You might want to listen to them. They're
Okay.
good. I don't know.
I mean,
it's Paul Gilbert.
Right, shredding Paul Gilbert, not Mr. Big Green Tinted 60s Mind Paul Gilbert, like heavy metal shred Paul Gilbert.
Yeah, like six strings with six strings and loud kind of shred Paul Gilbert. Paul Gilbert before he became, I don't know, Paul Simon, whatever happened to him. But yeah, just take a look at Racer X in your small amount of spare time. You'll like some other stuff. Now, I'm not saying you're going to like all of it and fall in love with them, but you're going to like some other stuff.
Okay.
And Scott, I know you're a Priest fan. You need to look for Racer X's song "Heart of a Lion" because that was actually, I want to say, was a Defenders of the Faith era Priest song that they never recorded, and basically gave it to the guys in Racer X because they were friendly with them. So yeah, it's an unreleased Priest song that Racer X covered. It's very cool.
Okay.
I always wondered, Tim, too, why, because I had heard that they were pretty friendly with them and they knew that. I always wondered why Paul Gilbert was never sort of asked to join Kiss during that time period of like revolving guitar players.
I'm not sure if there were any connections between Racer X and Kiss.
No, he said Priest earlier, Chris.
Oh, Priest. I thought you said
Judas
Kiss.
Priest. No, Judas Priest. No, it was Priest. Old Priest album.
Every time Tim talks, I just expect Kiss to come out of his mouth. just like when I talk, it's
Metallica.
It's Metallica.
Yeah. No, I mean that is a fair thing to say about me.
It's fair to say about me too. Trust me.
So what do you guys expect from me then? Awkward silence. That's what I get.
I don't know. I haven't. That's funny. Yeah, I really haven't pinned you down as he's going to talk about this band again, kind of a guy.
Yeah, well,
or even a specific type of music, because you've brought up different. It's more towards the rock part of heavy metal. Obviously not, but yeah, I don't think you've ever. I'm not sure if you've thrown out the same band twice. To be honest with you,
earlier in the years, I threw out Scorpions a couple times and Judas Priest.
Okay.
Earlier in the 80s, though. That was like 81,
right.
82, 83, somewhere in there. So, all right. Well, those are actually, there's one more. Luke Del Regad at TYCEUF, Tice UF, posted Pride, which was the White Lion album. He also said Back for the Attack, Hysteria, and Appetite for Destruction. So Pride, another one of the pretty boy hair bands that made it kind of an impact at the time.
Yes, and they get disregarded, but their guitar player Vito Bratta was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. He actually, really, really, really good guitar player. And I always change the lyrics to this song from to wait, I never had a chance to hate you.
Okay. That's funny.
I mean, it's hair band at its absolute peak. It's, wait and when children cry. I mean, if these songs weren't written for the woman in the crowd, to do that from the glam metal side, I don't know. Like this is specific, in my estimation. This is specific songwriting and advertising from a record company to say these guys are good looking, they've got hair, they've got this, They're going to write these songs. We're going to promote the heck out of them, and it worked. It absolutely worked. I would guarantee you 3-1 at least women bought this over men, without question.
I would have to agree with that.
I would bet money on it. It might even be more than 3-1. I think this was specific. Like, this is heavy metal target marketing.
Yeah, I could see that. I would agree with that. So, cool. Do you guys have any more? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I got to mention a couple things here. There were some interesting soundtracks and compilations that came out this year. One of them was the Less Than Zero movie soundtrack, which is probably the only place in the universe where Poison and Slayer are on the same record.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm surprised it didn't implode on itself.
And where the Bangles did, or was it the Bangles?
Yeah, they did the Hazy Shade of Winter.
Hazy Shade of Winter cover song, which is actually a pretty cool version.
I like
cool,
that. Yeah. It's a good one.
That's actually a decent soundtrack.
I own that soundtrack. I did at the time. I don't own it right now.
No, it was all covers. Aerosmith's on there, Poison covering Kiss's Rock and Roll All Night, Slayer doing Inagata Davida, Joan
Jett.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's just a pretty diverse. Roy Orbison and Slayer. I mean, come on. Then there was the Light of Day movie soundtrack with Michael J. Fox and Joan Jett and Michael McKean, a.k.a. David St. Hubbins from Spinal Tap.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, let's see, what was the other one? I wanted to bring up, this was the first year of the very special Christmas compilations, and it was pretty cool. I mean, Bruce Springsteen was on it, U2 was on it, but Bon Jovi was on it. And it's a cool thing. I mean, they raised a lot of money for a good cause, but that was another diverse one. I wouldn't really call it metal, but, Bon Jovi's sticking their finger in the pie there a little bit.
Yeah.
And then one of my
I'll go non-heavy metal with that. Was also one of the coolest Christmas songs was Christmas in Hollis from Run DMC. I know it has nothing to do with metal, but it's still one of my favorite Christmas songs to this day.
Well, we can circle back to metal because they did the Aerosmith song, right?
Well, that's true. They did, Walk This Way with Aerosmith. So there you go.
And one of my favorite stories of hard rock and metal, of course, you guys know I like the band Accept, right? And this was the year where their singer, Udo Dirkschneider, was fired from the band, okay? And his first solo album came out this year. That's a pretty fast turnaround. Well, then you read into it and you find out what happened was the rest of the guys in Accept, they had written songs to be their next album with Udo, but then they fired him. So what did they do? They gave him all those songs and said, you can use this for your first solo album.
Wow.
And so he got a bunch of different. He assembled a team of basically no-name German musicians. He cherry-picked a couple of guys from a couple other German bands that nobody here in this country knew anything about. And he formed a band called UDO and put out an album called Animal House. And all the songs are written by his former bandmates. Now, okay, that just doesn't happen. We're going to fire you, but as your parting gift, here's an album. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly. That's really good severance pay, considering. I mean, if you think about it, that's a really good severance package. You're no longer in the band, but here's a complete album full of material to use in your next band. But yeah, it was pretty cool because there are like some things like Headbangers Ball debuted this year, which for whatever reason I thought it was earlier than this, but it does say 1987. And
there used to be the show Heavy Metal Mania, which sort of evolved into Headbangers Ball.
Okay, because I thought there was something on MTV that was before it. So this is when it officially became Headbangers Ball then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Nikki Sixx almost overdosed, the famous Nikki Sixx heroin hotel room story.
Right.
Which is just so heavy metal. It's incredible. But also... the good and the bad, in my estimation, Skid Row was formed this year, and I love them. They may be brought up at some point in this series. The bad part is Winger was also.
Don't ever say that to my wife, dude.
Who?
Don't ever say that to my wife.
Claim to fame. We'll get to them later, I'm sure. Maybe someone will bring them up, unless Chrissy takes your spot one night just to bring up that band, whatever the case is. I am in a Winger video that was on MTV.
Get out.
Easy Come, Easy Go was shot live at the Bayfront Center in St. Pete, and I am in one of the crowd shots along with my friends.
Can you see you?
I have no clue. I was there. I was like in the 6th row. But we were at that concert.
Chrissy's going to like to hear that.
Yep. If you look at the video, Easy Come, Easy Go, but they filmed that during their live concert in St. Pete at the Bayfront Center, and we were at that show.
Yeah, my wife's got a thing for Winger. This is all good stuff. So let's. You think we're ready to wrap up 1987? No. Oh wait, I wanted to bring up one more. I forgot about this one. It's like a one-hit wonder to me, and that's Lizzie Borden. Me Against the World is on the album Visualize, whatever you want to call it. And that is just I love that song. The video is one of the strangest videos I've ever seen. Lizzie Borden is the hair. All these guys have the biggest hair of the big hair bands. I swear, some of them might measure 2.5 feet wide, 3 feet wide. It's like, how do you get through a door? Like two of those guys could not go through the same door at the same time. But it's a cool song. I love that song. So I just wanted to bring that up real quick because it's one that is in my constant rotation of my on my iPod. So
it's a good pick. Lizzie Borden, the man in the band, they're supremely talented, but I think they went a little over the top with that stuff, with the looks and the garish outfits and whatever, because I think it distracted a little bit from their music. And Scott, if you like them, do yourself a favor and check out their albums from the 2000s, because they went away and came back. Mm-hmm. They came back hard and strong. Deal with the Devil from 2000, Appointment with Death from 2007 are both really, really good. It's funny that you were talking about B-level bands. You probably call these guys a C-level band, really, back in the 80s. And for them to even bother to come back, and then not only to come back, but to just kick some serious you-know-what many years later, it was pretty amazing. Those guys are very cool. I'm glad you mentioned them.
Oh, cool. Yeah. All right. Anything else, guys? Are we good?
Joe Holmes is on that album? Is that the Joe Holmes from...
It is the
Ozzy?
Joe Holmes. Yep, it's him.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's interesting. I did not know that. I even know who Lizzie Borden is and the band and all that, but did not know that was the David Lee Roth, Ozzy Osbourne, Joe Holmes. Pretty cool.
All right, I'm going to mention one more.
The famous Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, Joe Holmes.
Was he in there?
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's drunk in the pool pouring whiskey on himself.
Oh, no. You're thinking of Chris Holmes from Wasp.
Okay, wrong Holmes. Okay, yeah. Gotcha. That was, okay, totally different guy.
Okay, I was going to say, yeah. No, anyway, the one last one I got to bring up is a Japanese band called EZO. You guys ever heard of them?
Yeah, I've heard the name. I can't remember what they do, but
they had they came from nowhere. Gene Simmons co-produced their album. They had, literally fell out of nowhere, in my opinion. They were on Geffen Records, which was a huge label, as we discussed earlier. Turns out they'd been around for a couple of years. They had released a couple albums in Japan under a different band name. But if you're bored, Google these guys and check out their look, because they had kind of the kabuki makeup, which of course Kiss was known to wear every once in a while. But the artwork in the album booklet, these guys, the makeup and outfits and costumes they wear is unbelievable. If you've seen the Pirates of the Caribbean movies with the like fishmen pirates that are on Davy Jones's ship, that's what these guys looked like back then. It was kind of like Guar meets Lordy meets Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know, it was crazy stuff. And musically, it was interesting. It wasn't your typical hair metal. They had some co-writes with some American folks to help them out with the lyrics, but musically, it's pretty diverse stuff, and it's really good production, which was unusual because Gene Simmons, I don't think, was ever really known for his production skills. So it's kind of a really weird album, but I mean that in a good every good way I can say weird. That's how I mean it. It's worth investigating. I think. Easy O.
Yeah, I see the images. They do have some interesting makeup going on.
Poor Gene Simmons really tried. He really, really tried to be a producer and all that stuff. It just never quite worked out for him.
So, all right. I think we're good then. 87, another awesome year. I was really shocked that we were able to put 2 episodes together. I didn't think it would go.
You were? You think? You didn't think?
I really didn't think it was going to be that big. I don't know why. I guess because I didn't really care for some of the albums on. I think I remember listening to Whitesnake. I remember listening to. I don't know. I can't. Some of these I don't even remember. Like at the time, other than Appetite for Destruction, a few others. But I didn't think it was going to be this deep. Oh, Surfing with the Alien. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I was kind of surprised. I haven't really.
There was a Kiss album too. In that year.
There was.
Yeah.
Oh, crazy!
And Ace Frehley resurfaced. That was interesting because he had been silent since he left Kiss.
Is that Frehley's Comet?
Yeah.
The first, because I don't even have Wikipedia up. I was kind of shutting down my computer. That's the first Frehley's Comet album, right?
Yep. This was the year that came out. We didn't talk about Manowar, one of my favorites. They had an album.
Yeah.
There's more, but we got to end it at some point, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's 2 more years to do. We might want to, I think. Yeah. 88, 89.
Yeah. So.
Wow. And this 88 is loaded.
Really? I didn't get a chance. I haven't had a chance to look too deep into it. Other than I do know that Winger.
3.
I know that Winger is.
Yeah, Winger's in there. I've got 3 off the top of my head without even looking up anything that came out. I can instantly run 3 right off the top of my head. This is a loaded year, in my estimation.
Huh. All right. Cool. Well, then I guess next week. 1988, part 1 of 5.
Perfect. Part 1 of 5. Yeah.
It's going to be a 5-parter.
I'm going to choose one album, and I'm going to take my entire 20 minutes of speaking on just one album. That's what I'm going to do next week.
Are you going to do that?
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, the game. Oh, that album. I know where you're going. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. I won't pick it. We'll let you have that one.
No, whoever wants to pick it, pick it. It's all fair. It's all fair in love and metal.
Nice. I like that tagline. That's good. I might have to put that up on Twitter or Facebook or something. That's funny.
There you go.
All right, guys. It's been fun.
All right, gents. Until next week.
Wait, I'll take care of the social media real quick here. We got Christopher Zen or at Christopher Zen on Twitter, at TSW512 for Tim on Twitter, and at 80's Auto Reverse for me on Twitter. And you can find all of us through the 80's Reboot Overdrive, either the website or the Facebook page or on the Twitter page. So check it out. If you want to hear any other episodes, you can go back and listen to other years that we've done, and all the other 80's Reboot stuff is there too, which there's so much more to listen to.
Yeah, please catch a listen of all the 80s stuff. There's a lot more than just metal. It's movies and TV shows and all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing a series on the Breakfast Club, actors, and we've done Molly Ringwald. I talked with Dave and Rose about Molly Ringwald, Ali Sheedy, and not Robert Downey Jr. from that one. Judd Nelson. We did a Robert Downey Jr. one a few weeks ago, and we're still working on a few others. So we're doing the Icon series, they're calling them, which one of my favorites that Dave and I talked about. This is about a month and a half ago. We did Chevy Chase. in the 80s, and that was a fun show to do because there's so much great Chevy Chase stuff. So, little side note for everybody, if you want to go back and listen, it's there's a lot more stuff on the 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, considering Deicide and Death got brought up in this particular version of Part 2, 1987, you might want to lighten it up with a little Chevy Chase chatter.
Yeah, we could do that. That'd probably be a good idea. Step it back a notch.
Exactly.
All right, guys, have a great evening, and I will talk to you sometime before next Thursday so we can get ready for 1988.
See ya.
See you, everybody.
Good night.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.